Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm here today to talk to you about our cat side disinfecting protocol. Yesterday we did a live stream video and had some technical difficulties, so wanted to refilm just a little bit of that content in case you are interested at home. So what we're talking about today is disinfection and how PAWS keeps the cat side of our building clear of infection, disease, as much as possible, and how we do disinfecting here at PAWS. So there's a few things that we utilize at PAWS. First and foremost, the thing we use more than anything else is just good old soap and water. This is a bottle with water and just a few drops of Dawn dish soap in it. We use that for spot cleaning throughout the cages. If a cat were to vomit and just get a little bit of their cage dirty, then we wipe that up. And we talk a little bit more about that in a moment when we go back to our quarantine and intake area. So the main disinfectant that we use here at PAWS is called Oxivir. It's also called another brand name is Rescue, used by some other shelters, and that is accelerated hydrogen peroxide. That is a disinfectant that kills all of the things that we're worried about killing here at PAWS. That includes panleukopenia, calicivirus, parvovirus, and it's even effective against ringworm. So that is our primary disinfectant that we use here. But it's important to note that anytime you use any disinfectant, you have to use it properly in order for it to work and to disinfect surfaces. So something we rarely use at PAWS, but do sometimes use in case we have certain types of outbreaks. Primarily, we will use bleach whenever we are facing or handling animals with ringworm. Ringworm is very resistant to disinfectants, heat, very challenging to get out of the environment. So that's when we pull out the bleach. And you might think like, yeah, bleach is kind of the big guns. That's where you have to pull it out and just bleach everything. But bleach is one of the trickiest disinfectants to use properly and effectively. Bleach in the presence of organic material becomes deactivated. So what does that mean in normal terms? It means if you are wiping a surface and there is cat litter, cat hair, cat food left on that surface and you're wiping it with a bleach solution, you didn't disinfect anything because all of that stuff there inactivated your bleach solution. So whenever we're disinfecting with bleach or anything, there's 3 steps. We wipe down all the surfaces, remove all organic material. Second step, apply the disinfectant appropriately. Third step is to wipe up the disinfectant or remove the disinfectant from the surfaces, however indicated for that particular disinfectant. So today, Abigail's just going to show you how she would typically disinfect a room.
So basically whenever I'm disinfecting rooms, the first thing that I do is I come in and I pick up all of the toys and everything that I can off of the ground. Because basically it's my job to disinfect the floor, the walls, and then wipe down what I can in the room essentially. Throughout the week we also have other chores for all of the rooms where like the cages and the jumpers would be disinfected. But for today it's mainly the walls and the floor that I worry about. So as you can see, I have everything picked up off the floor in here. So the first step would be to remove the organic matter, which I have already done. So the floor has been swept and you can see that I'm moving everything out of the way as I go. So from there, I am ready to actually start spraying the Oxivir, which I have here. So we just use a pump. It's really easy. So you can see I'm going to cover the walls and the floor and basically go up the full half the length, which is that special walling, which is
FRP.
FRP.
Fiberglass reinforced plastic.
And then from there, I just have other materials out here that once I would have basically everything covered with Oxivir, I would wipe down the wooden wall pieces, I would wipe down the jumpers, and then mop the floor up with just water with a little bit of Lysol in it.
Hi, we are back now in our intake and quarantine area. I'm not quite into the full intake and quarantine area though. We are in still this green zone. That is still considered the area of our general population. Past that red line, we keep everything back in the intake and quarantine area. So before I go over the red line, I am putting booties on. Some of our volunteers have shoes that they can reuse, which is especially helpful right now during this outbreak because PPE, personal protective equipment, is harder to find right now. People are buying it up because they're worried that they won't be able to get it, or people who don't normally use it are using it. So those shoes being able to be disinfected on the surfaces and then reused is really helpful for us. So come on in, this is our intake room, and right now we are pretty empty. Because of the outbreak, we have slowed down intakes and we're reworking exactly how we want to handle our intake procedures and how we can respond safely and appropriately to the community. But for right now, we've got 2 kitties in here that we can feature and talk about the setup. So right now we have Icarus, who is very nicely demonstrating for you, or showing off for you, our disposable food containers that we use. You also can see, and maybe Rocky, this cage is a little bit easier to see, that we use in our intake and quarantine areas, we use disposable litter boxes. So we have our disposable food containers and our disposable litter boxes. This is because of the volume of cats going through this area. It helps us to save time on how much save time on disinfecting. It also, just practically speaking, this is a smaller room and it's already crowded with cages, and having things like the disposable litter pans and the disposable food dishes allows us to just get rid of them rather than dirtying up our cleaning areas with things that are waiting to be properly disinfected. So in this area, we try and keep it clean, keep it tidy. It's hard to do in a small area with a bunch of cats, but we do the best we can. So we are going to go over to our quarantine area next. Our quarantine area, we always go to second. Hi, Sarah. We always go to our quarantine area second, because after our intake area, because this area, should they actually have something that we're quarantining animals from, we don't want to bring that over to our intake cats, who we are assuming are just coming in from the public, and maybe they have fleas, maybe they have an upper respiratory infection, but we're hoping that they don't have a disease that can necessarily spread to the other cats. We use our quarantine room as needed, though, for cats who actually have to be quarantined. We might have ringworm or might have some other communicable disease. So we always do the population that's considered more vulnerable first. So now we're moving into our quarantine room. We have another red line for a quarantine room in case we have a true quarantine and we don't even want to bring whatever's out here into the communal area right there. So right now the quarantine room is being used as what we call intake overflow. Until very recently, when the outbreak started, we had all of our cages full, but we were lucky enough to get them out to foster homes. So we have a very low number back in our intake and quarantine area. So you can come in and, since this is just intake overflow, and see Blue Moon and Marvin. So these guys stay in their cage for 7 to 10 days for their standard intake quarantine in case they're carrying something. And during that time, we only do what we call spot cleaning. I talked a little bit ago about the use of soap and water, and that's what we use to spot clean. And Marvin down there, before we came in, threw up his breakfast. So that's actually a good example of a situation where we're going to spot clean his cage. We'll take out the soil bedding and anything that got on the actual cage itself. We'll just clean up with soap and water. What we don't do is disinfect every day or overly disinfect, and that's because of what Boo Moon here is doing. He's really illustrating it very well. When they come here and everything is sanitized and without a smell, or maybe has a chemical smell from a disinfectant, cats who are very sensitive to smell are stressed by that. So over the course of 7 days, Boo Moon is going to rub all over his kennel and get his scent on everything. He even has his little wash rag here that has some feel away on it so that it's just a calming pheromone. So we don't want to go in and just take out bedding every single day just so that we feel like it's clean, because the stress of the cat is really of utmost importance to us, and a stressed cat is more likely to get sick. So we balance cleanliness with stress of the cat. Now, if Boo Moon was in here and he was suspected of or had ringworm, I would not be rubbing all over him, and this would be an entirely different story. I'd be wearing gloves, I would be wearing a gown, a hairnet, I would be wearing multiple sets of booties, and Boo Moon would be getting his bedding changed out every single shift. And that's because if he had a very specific type of infection. So luckily we don't see that a ton, but we have to handle them differently when we do see it. So that's a little bit about our intake and quarantine room. Hope you found it helpful and informative. Thank you.